So now we're running a little bit late, but that's fine. We've got about 20 minutes, I'd say, where we've got basically coaches that help support young people with ADHD. So we've got Eleni. Hello, Eleni. So just Eleni and I think Alexia as well. I think Alexia, you there? Come and join us. And let's have a little chat to attendees just to kind of give them a better idea of what how we coach young people. I'm just going to see if I can find Alexia. Here she is. Going to ask to unmute. But yeah, here we go. I think we'll get Alexia joining us soon. There we are. Okay. Eleni, that was amazing, wasn't it? Having David is so inspirational, isn't he?
Indeed, Stephanie. Very difficult to follow that one up.
Yeah, well, he's the father of ADHD coaching, isn't he? So really helpful. Hello, Alexia. How are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. Yes, it's always so inspirational to hear David because he's just so positive and he's such an advocate for ADHD and ADHD coaching, and you just come away with warm, fuzzy feelings.
Yeah, he really ignites you in terms of, the things that make us motivated, particularly as ADHD coaches. Hearing from someone like David is so inspirational. It is something that obviously ignites our interest and makes us better coaches and want to be better coaches. So what we'll do these next kind of 20 minutes, I thought we'd just have a chat around, certain people that we've coached, just to give attendees an idea of how we help the younger people with ADHD in terms of how the coaching, can move them forward. So I thought just ask a few questions and you guys can share your experiences and, where appropriate, I can always dive in. But thank you guys for attending and sharing your knowledge. So I guess maybe starting, Alexia, with you. What kind of challenges do you find that young people present with in coaching? Like what are the main challenges do you see with them?
I would say that the primary challenge is that parents and educators see the individual and they have expectations of what that person should be doing at a certain stage of their life. So they're 16, they should be doing their GCSEs. They're very bright. They should be getting A's and A stars. And what we know as ADHD coaches is that ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition, and certainly the younger you are, the more you're impacted by developmental delay. And that could be anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So if you're looking at a 16-year-old and you're expecting them to totally ace their GCSEs, they may be working really, really hard to overcome all their challenges. But in actual fact, they may well be developmentally closer in age to an 11-year-old. And that is a colossal challenge. And the first step is really to understand what is going on with that individual, where their challenges are and where their strengths are, and how to use their strengths and how to understand the executive function difficulties, and also understanding what do they want. Because it may be that, the parents are sitting there saying, well, he's got to get his GCSEs or he's got to get his A levels. And that particular individual isn't actually ready at that time. It may happen. It may just need a little bit of patience and a bit of time and really understanding what does that person want, what does that individual want, and how can they get there in the way that functions best to their strengths, rather than presenting huge challenges and obstacles to overcome.
No, thank you. It is really tough, isn't it, for them? As David said, ADHD is situationally variable. And he also said, the education system is not really set up for our young people with ADHD. Eleni, did you want to share as well in terms of the challenges that are presented to you in coaching?
I would echo exactly what Alexia said. And whether you're based here in the US, as I am, or in the UK system, the challenges Alexia describes are universal, I think. And when parents come to me for training, as I support a lot of parents and students, typically they're seeking coaching for their child who has either recently been diagnosed with ADHD or suspected. And it really is sort of a step back when we start talking about ADHD and recognize that parents themselves really don't have a clear understanding. You'd be surprised at what some parents actually think contributes to ADHD. So the first step is really to kind of dispel the lack of clarity and to make sure that they do become properly get a proper understanding of ADHD and what that involves and entails. And what we like to say at the ADHD Advocate is looking through the ADHD lens. And that lens really shifts so much. What Alexia said about focusing on a child's strengths, what does the child want to do, recognizing there may be some kind of a delay. All of these things contribute to that understanding that parents so critically need before we can even talk about how to support or coach around that.
Yeah, there's quite a few obstacles as talking about the parents, particularly if they've got ADHD and don't know it.
Yes, we see that a lot as well. They seek a diagnosis once their child has been diagnosed, and then that can lead to a lot of other conversations around ADHD.
So how would you, what advice would you give? Obviously, some educators, they could see it as well, that it would really help parents to maybe seek diagnosis as well. How would you get parents to maybe consider these, consider looking at a diagnosis for themselves? How have you had to do it before in coaching, Alexia?
I think a lot of parents now do realize that that the challenges that their children face do come from them more and more, and often, but they sort of dismiss it because they've learned the sort of hacks that make them able to to sort of make their lives work. Although having recently had to try and organize a couple of phone calls with somebody who kept getting the day wrong, called me the day after we were supposed to speak, all this, I kind of thought, yeah, you could do with a little bit of help here. But often I think the way to approach it is the parent comes to you with, fix my child, here's my child, fix them, please. And you work with a child and you work with a parent, and you reach a place, hopefully, where everything's a lot more comfortable. Everyone understands each other. And I think when the parent realizes how helpful it is and how important it is for them to really understand and appreciate their child's strengths, as well as the areas where challenges arise, then it's a really good moment to say, so, have you thought about working with your own challenges? And, have you thought about exploring ways that you could take a little bit more control over your life, or just look at the aspects that you're finding difficult?
Yeah, it's important.
Sorry.
No, Eleni, please.
No, I would add to that also, not only helping parents understand coaching could be a benefit to them, but the benefit of working with a child at whatever age is right for them to feel comfortable sort of owning the symptoms and their own ADHD, as David said. So whatever that means to them or looks like to them, it's really important to kind of be on that and understand it at, of course, a age and developmentally appropriate way. And that's where coaching can help and sort of take that burden from parents who might not be equipped to help their child kind of work through these emotions or these challenges or the symptoms that really can be debilitating over time.
Yeah, it's an untangling, isn't it? Because when you've got a family with ADHD, and there is the ADHD with the parents and the child, and quite often, obviously, that causes a lot of chaos, a lot of pain sometimes, because obviously neurotypical approaches aren't going to be effective, and so the parent feels like they're failing. Often they're getting the message from school as well that they don't have the child under control. But they're really trying. But that consistency, which is so important when you're parenting, right? They say that the most consistent thing about us ADHDs is we are inconsistent, which really, that's really difficult for parenting, children with ADHD that really do kind of need to know what's expected, particularly if there's autism as well, that need for safety. Unfortunately, as we know, and I'm sure I've experienced with some of our clients, sometimes the parent, because of their ADHD, that safety is kind of, missing in terms of the child feeling like, okay, that parent's going to be on it for me, or my executive function filler, they're going to be able to hold their kind of temper, because quite often it's the opposite, isn't it, with us ADHDs in terms of our own emotional dysregulation as parents. It's a tough gig.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, what do you guys, what do you find in coaching? What kind of strategies would you, and also for the benefit of participants here, what are the things that tend to move the dial? What makes the difference for these families, would you say?
I would say, I mean, I'm working so much at the moment with emotional regulation, and that's primarily in the parent, because if you have a parent that is losing control, getting really angry, and not being able to see the situation in front of them because they're just responding in a purely emotional way, you're just not getting anywhere, and everybody's going to end up upset, and the fallout is terrible, and it just doesn't help. And there's so much work to be done, because we do find it so hard to regulate our emotions. There is so much work to be done about understanding that process and really being able to pause, understand what's going on, feel it where it is in your body, name it to tame it, and then think, okay, what does this situation actually require of me right now? How should I respond? And how do I want to respond? Okay, I'm going to put that to one side. What is the best response now? What am I trying to achieve? And how can I get that out of the situation?
That's a lot to consider, isn't it?
Yeah, it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice, and it just keeps coming up, because the behavior of a child can appear so challenging, and that behavior, it's not done on purpose. It's a communication. It's a way that the child is saying, I don't have what I need right now. I need something else. There's something wrong, and I don't know how to express it. But the problem is that the parents just, when you're faced with that situation, you're like, I don't know what you want. And it's frustration as much as anything else. And that leads, particularly when you have an ADHD parent, an ADHD child, you get two volcanoes going off at the same time. And that's very, very messy.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And also, sort of digging down a bit deeper, the executive function challenges that we see both in parents and in kids. And as you said, a lot of children, a lot of people need to work so hard just to appear like they're keeping up, or they sort of have it together. But the dysfunction that is happening is really, can be quite significant. And the executive function skills that many people can take for granted can really be the ones that can be debilitating over time. Identifying these and giving the child or the parent the space to kind of attach, to identify what it is that they're struggling with is hugely powerful. And I think a step that can often be sort of overlooked.
Yeah, and I guess that's the beauty of the coaching, isn't it? Because the coaching creates the space that often, parents with ADHD, they're running from one place to the next, very much fighting fires. There's not that time to reflect, to process, to, try on new things, to kind of measure, to set intention. Because as a parent, with ADHD, isn't it? It's so important that we kind of are clear about where the kind of holes are and kind of set intention afresh all the time, to take a breath, to not react. It's really difficult. And without space, though, we can't do any of those things. Do you find that too, Alexia, that that's what you see with parents?
Yes, and I wish it was a better known thing, that there is family coaching available for parents as much as for children, because now it's just seen as sort of ADHD coaching for children so that you can fix them. And actually it's as much about getting the parents on board and involved, and really educating everybody as to what's going on. And you could, I mean, you know, I didn't even know about ADHD coaching when my eldest, who has ADHD, was younger, and it could have been just revolutionary to have had that support. You know, I wish I'd known about it, and I'd wish I'd been able to make use of it, because it would have changed things so completely for us, because, you know, it just caused a huge amount of friction. And now that I've got the knowledge, you know, I want to be able to pass that on to as many people as possible, because it can really, really help with what's going on at home, with all the sort of flashpoints that occur during the day. And, you know, nothing's ever going to be 100% rosy, but at least you're going to understand what's going on, and the moments that are going to be triggers, the most difficult points, and how to deal with them, and how to deal with them a little bit better than the sort of potential chaos that you might have had in the past.
Yeah, I agree completely. In fact, in my coaching practice with the ADHD Advocate, we offer a self-paced parent education program, which really complements the coaching process tremendously. A lot of parents can really connect and identify with what it is, these behaviors that we've clearly identified, and can have a think about what that looks like to their child in their home. And as you said, what their response is, reaction versus the response. So giving them that framework to sort of think about what their child or their ADHD looked like is a very powerful tool as well.
Yeah, like Alexia said earlier, name it to tame it. Yeah, it's really important to be able to identify, isn't it? Identify the needs, the triggers that are kind of come up. Quite often we see in families, one person's kind of coping strategy is going to trigger someone else's kind of ADHD or whatever else is going on. For instance, you know, someone might want the radio on because they'll be bored, and if they're not going to have the radio on, they might start hitting their sibling. But then maybe the parent with ADHD can't stand the noise. And so, you know, it's really about trying to work out what's going on, you know, for each person, and where the needs are, and how to kind of get the needs met in a way that's going to not set everyone off. It's not easy. It's definitely the most difficult, isn't it? In terms of coaching, because there's so, you know, when you've got the interpersonal, the relationships, that's, you know, that additional layer, as opposed to when you're just coaching like the one person, like say, you know, an employee, about, you know, what things get in the way at work, and, you know, how to maybe manage the tasks and stuff like that. It's the relationships, you know, it's because it's obviously what's happening with them, and then how that kind of comes out with someone else and how they relate. So it's definitely a lot more layered, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think that also brings us around to a process that you can use a lot with families, and that's the collaboration, the collaborative problem solving, where you basically, you're sitting down and you're having a conversation, and you're inviting all parties to contribute to resolve an issue or come up with a better strategy for a situation. And it's all about hearing everybody's views and how to provide the best outcome. And it's not about, you know, I want this, so you need to do that. It's you know, this is the problem. How can we get to a better place to, you know, to resolve the situation, or to make it better? And it's all about collaboration. And that is so helpful, because it means the parent and the child, or whoever's involved, has an equal input and is working equally to resolve the issue.
Yeah, that kind of agency. Eleni,
Awesome.
do you agree as well? And
I would agree completely. And just to echo David's observation about sort of owning your own ADHD, our children have as much a stake in understanding their brains as do we, you know, in families and as with our own ADHD. So that is really important, Alexia. I completely agree.
Yeah, and there was a participant was asking, about, yeah, whether if her son started coaching, can the parents be involved too? Because her partner and daughter kind of accuse her of protecting or making excuses for her 18-year-old son with ADHD because they don't understand the challenges. I mean, we see that a lot, don't we, in the families, that lack of understanding. And so I guess that kind of answers your question in terms of what Alexia was saying, that it is, we definitely advocate for a collaborative approach to this, getting kind of everyone's views, everyone at the table, to kind of process. And sometimes coach kind of acts a bit like a mediator too. Everyone, provides a bit of accountability, because we know when families kind of do get together on their own and to discuss things, it can get a little bit, feisty, I would say.
Yes, and I think most coaching sessions with a child, even when they're 18, you do want to go back to the parents with a few ideas about what's been worked on, to sort of keep that dialogue up, because obviously the parents are going to be paying. They want to kind of see value for money, but it's part of the process that you have a session with a child, and that sometimes they really want to tell their parents what they've been working on and the ideas that they've come up with, and they take great pride in saying, I've found this really great thing to work on, and the parents can then be involved and help, and it's a really important part of the process to keep parents involved as much as possible.
Yeah, no, we definitely agree. Yeah, and then in terms of engaging the younger children with ADHD, what kind of strategies or tactics would you kind of use in order to engage the younger ones? Or have you got, and what would you say to maybe people that wanted to get their younger children into coaching? What would be the kind of criteria for whether you'd coach them or not?
There was an interesting, it was actually on Instagram, but it was talking about, I think it was based on a study, but when you learn something, you can do over 200 repetitions and find it'll get fixed in your brain. And if you do it through play, it takes 10 times to fix something or less. So a lot of coaching for younger children is done via play. And you can also do that online. You can play Jenga online, or Uno, or any of the sort of card games, and you can really reinforce, talk about strengths, and as and when they come into play while you're sort of working through a card game, you can talk about these things and really reinforce them as you work.
Yeah. And games as well, just the repetition, the skills you need to be patient, to plan ahead, to take turns. These are all kind of reinforcing executive function skills, but being fun. And as you said, last.
Yeah, there's a commonality, isn't there, with autism in terms of the interest factor. Obviously, David was saying, that fuel for the ADHD brain, it is an interest. And with the kids, you've got to find the hook quite often. Like, do they really want to be spending part of their Saturday morning talking to us? Probably not, particularly if they've been playing their video games and things like that. And it's about, isn't it? It's finding that kind of hook to attach to. So yeah, I've got a client that's ADHD and quite very autistic, actually. And he's just obsessed with video games. And, I'll actually coach him while he's playing the video games. But it's been quite effective, because there's lots of things within the video games that you can kind of, use as parallels to kind of real life, and in terms of, that impulsivity. And it's quite an interesting way to coach, actually. As a coach, it's very challenging and creative. It keeps kind of me interested and on my toes, but obviously for the child as well, because he's so interested in the gaming, like what Alexia was saying, this kind of stuff, it sticks. And we quite often, the stuff he does really well in coaching, we suggest, oh, well, in real life, right? What about trying it like this? So seeing it, the maths, for instance, he was able to improve his maths, because we looked at this Fortnite game and he started being able to see the kind of benefits of understanding percentages to kind of work out his rankings. And, like, again, always attaching, how do we make it, how do we make this relevant to you, I found, because education, right? So much of education for these kids, they sit there going, why do I need to know that? Do you find that too?
Yes, the authentic interest, absolutely.
Yeah, and as relevant as possible, so that you're constantly drawing parallels with the game and their life and their strengths and their skills, and you've demonstrated your key strength of whatever it is, and bringing that in and saying, well, yes, you're really engaged here, you're really interested because you love X, so yeah, it's bringing in that kind of those demonstrating the skills in action.
Yeah, and like you said, reinforcing those strengths, because quite often these kids, the negative messaging they're getting, it's really quite crippling. And like what David was saying, that's where where focus goes, the energy flows. And as coaches, a big part of what we do as the ADHD coach is to very much take that strengths-based approach and try and shift that narrative, the negative narrative that these kids have, and reinstill hope and get them to rebuild the more positive narrative and get them to more purposely lean into their strengths. And that's going to create momentum, which, again, David helpfully reminded us that ADHD very much is that challenge of momentum, isn't it? And so, ADHD coaching really helps build that up in all the ways that we've kind of talked about.
Yeah. There's that terrible statistic that by the age of 10, the average child with ADHD will have heard 10,000, was it 10, even more negative comments. And, that's one of the most key things about coaching, is really to change that view around and celebrate the wins and the things that have gone well, and to look for the positive more often, so that you can really change that mindset.
Yeah, and the earlier the better, right? Because we, coaching adults as well, we can see, and being adults with ADHD ourselves, right? What happens if the narrative stays negative, right? There are implications, some of them quite dire. And so whatever we can do, if we can kind of stop things from happening by reaching these kids earlier, that is we've got to do it. I don't know, it's like a calling, isn't it, guys? And so, that's what us ADHD coaches are here to do. So yes, definitely do reach out for coaching if you feel that your child could do with some support. But thank you so much, Alexia and Eleni. Thank you. And